Here's the test. They saw the message, then nothing. Your thumb hovers over the screen, the room goes quieter, and the read receipt begins to feel larger than it is. In that moment, your mind does not wait for facts. It starts writing a story. You were ignored, you were too much, you should have said it differently, maybe you should send something lighter, something sharper, something that might pull a response out of the dark. By the end, you'll know how to separate the event from the judgment, because that split is where your calm comes back. What happened is simple. A message was read and not answered yet. But the pressure comes from what you attach to that fact. Epictetus would treat that gap as the true battleground. In his teaching on impressions, the first appearance is not automatically the truth. It is only an appearance. What hurts you is not the silence itself, but the judgment that the silence means rejection, disrespect, or humiliation. Once you see that clearly, you stop confusing uncertainty with a verdict. That distinction matters because the wrong instinct is to chase relief. You refresh the chat. You reread your own words. You begin drafting a follow-up before you have even decided what the silence means. The hidden cost is subtle. Every time you do that, you train your nervous system to treat another person's timing as authority over your state of mind. The read receipt becomes a lever, and your piece starts moving whenever someone else moves or doesn't move. Stoic patience does not ask you to pretend you do not care. It asks you to care without surrendering your center. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays that anxiety grows when we suffer in imagination before reality has even spoken. That is exactly what happens here. The mind inflates one quiet moment into a whole case against you. But the Stoic move is to refuse the inflation. Name the fact plainly. The message was seen. No reply has arrived yet. Then stop. Do not add the trial, the sentence, and the shame. From there, choose the next right action instead of the next anxious one. Maybe the right action is to return to the work in front of you. Maybe it is to put the phone face down and let time do some of the labor. Maybe it is to wait until you have something clear to say, rather than sending a follow-up that only purchases 10 minutes of relief. Hierocles, in the fragments and later reports that survive, helps frame this beautifully. You can care about another person without gripping them as if their response were part of your body. Concern is human, possession is not. Be careful here not to turn stoicism into emotional numbness. The point is not to erase disappointment. The point is to keep disappointment from becoming a command. You are allowed to notice the ache. You are allowed to dislike uncertainty. But you do not have to let that discomfort decide your next move. A calm response protects dignity because it keeps you from bargaining with silence. Practice this today in one small sequence. When the phone lights up and then goes quiet, pause. State the fact in one sentence. Drop the story. Ask, what is the action I would choose if I were not trying to soothe anxiety? Then do that action. The more often you rehearse this, the less power the read receipt has to pull you out of yourself. The message is an event. Your judgment is the part you can govern. That is where freedom begins. Rule 2. Do not confuse the silence with the meaning you invented for it. Here's the test. A message has been seen. The reply has not come back. That is the whole fact. Everything after that arrives from your own mind. They are upset. They are losing interest. They are ignoring you on purpose. They are choosing someone else. They are laughing at you. They have already decided what you are worth. The body feels the difference between fact and story as if both were equally real, which is why the chest tightens before the truth is even known. That is the danger. Not the pause itself, but the instant your judgment begins to treat the pause like a verdict. Once that happens, you are no longer waiting for information. You are waiting inside a self-made trial. You start checking the screen again, rewriting the message, drafting a follow-up you do not actually want to send, or inventing a reason that will let you keep hope and fear alive at the same time. The hidden cost is not just embarrassment, it is dependence. A person's timing begins to feel like a lever attached to your mood. This is where the Stoic turn matters. Epictetus gives the core rule here. An impression is not yet truth. It enters the mind first, but it still has to be examined before you assent to it. In the Stoic view, what disturbs us is often not the event itself, but the judgment we hurry to place on the event. The read receipt is outside your control. The meaning you attach to it is not. That separation is not coldness, it is clarity. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays how much pain people create before reality has earned it. We suffer in imagination, then call it insight. We rehearse rejection so often that uncertainty starts to feel like proof. But silence is only silence until you make it heavier. Sometimes it means delay, sometimes distraction, sometimes uncertainty, sometimes a lack of skill, attention, energy, or courage on the other side. You do not know yet. And not knowing is uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same thing as injury. Practice begins with naming what is actually in front of you. Say it plainly. They saw the message. They have not replied. Then stop. Do not add motive where you do not have evidence. Do not reward the first anxious story with your obedience. If a reply matters, wait with discipline. If action is needed, choose the next clean action, not the next panicked one. That may mean returning to your work, putting the phone face down, taking one walk, or giving the conversation time to reveal itself instead of demanding it confess immediately. There is a caution here. Stoic patience is not pretending you don't care. It is not swallowing every slight or excusing every pattern. It is refusing to let incomplete information command your reactions. If someone repeatedly ignores you, you can notice the pattern without collapsing into chasing. If a relationship needs clarity, you can ask for it, without begging silence to become a guide. Care without grip is the aim. Make this a daily practice whenever the screen goes quiet. Fact first, story second, if it deserves to exist at all. Then choose what preserves your dignity, your attention, and your next useful move. That is how you stop letting one unread moment steer the whole day. Rule 3. Silence hurts because your mind wants closure now. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to separate a real fact from the story your mind adds to it, because that is where the pressure begins. You are in the middle of your day or your night, and the phone is face up in your hand. A message was seen, the room around you keeps moving, but your attention does not. People talk, a chair scrapes back, someone laughs near the door, yet the only thing that seems loud is the quiet from the other side of the screen. That gap feels personal. It feels like a judgment hanging in the air. The wrong instinct is to treat that gap as if it must be filled immediately. You want to check again, send another line, rewrite the message in your head, or invent a reason that will make the silence hurt less. The hidden cost is that each reflexive move teaches your mind to depend on another person's timing for relief. You stop waiting and start bargaining. You do not just want information anymore, you want rescue. That is how a simple delay turns into a small surrender of self-respect. Epictetus is useful here because he keeps the line clear between what happened and what you decided it means. A read receipt is one event. The conclusion that you have been dismissed, forgotten, or diminished is something else. The first belongs to the world, the second belongs to your judgment. Stoic training begins there. Pause before assent. Let the impression arrive without calling it truth too quickly. The fact may be incomplete. Your story is definitely incomplete. Seneca's warning about imagined injury fits this moment closely. He understood how the mind can make a wound larger in anticipation than in reality. Silence alone is not always rejection, not always insult, not always strategy. Sometimes it is fatigue, distraction, work, family, hesitation, or a dozen things you cannot see. If you keep feeding the worst interpretation, you will feel the sting of a future you invented. That is extra suffering, and it usually arrives before any actual answer does. Hierocles gives the cleaner, harder balance. Care for people without turning care into possession. You are allowed to want connection. You are allowed to value a reply. But another person's response time is not your property, and their delay is not proof that you must become smaller to earn attention. Affection without attachment to control is not coldness. It is steadiness. It lets you remain human without becoming dependent. Practically, this means that when the screen goes quiet, you name the fact in one sentence. They have not replied yet. Then you stop there. No extra courtroom, no narrative of humiliation, no forensic analysis of punctuation, timing, or online status. Ask one question only: what is the next right action that does not depend on them? Maybe it is putting the phone down and walking around the block. Maybe it is waiting until you have something clear and calm to say, if saying anything is still appropriate. The caution is simple. Stoic patience is not pretending not to care. It is not freezing your feelings or acting as if human connection does not matter. It matters. That is why the temptation to chase is so strong. But if you answer uncertainty with panic, you train yourself to obey it. If you answer it with restraint, you keep your center. Make this a daily practice. When silence hits, notice the first story, then separate it from the fact. Say it plainly. Feel the discomfort without negotiating with it. Return to your duty, your body, your room, your work. The read receipt is not the verdict. Your next choice is where your dignity begins again. Rule 4. Stop negotiating with your thumb. Here's the test. The moment your phone lights up, can you tell the difference between what actually happened and the story your body is trying to force out of it? A read receipt appears, the chat goes quiet, and suddenly your hand starts moving before your mind has finished thinking. You reread the last line. You draft a follow-up. You delete it. You reopen the thread. You change one word, then another, as if the perfect sentence could unlock a human being who has already gone silent. That loop feels active, but it's really a plea disguised as effort. The hidden cost is not only embarrassment if they never answer. It is that every extra check teaches you to seek relief through chasing. The more often you do it, the more your nervous system learns that uncertainty is unbearable unless you can immediately touch it, explain it, or force it to soften. In the short term, sending another text can feel like control. In the long term, it trains dependence. This is where the Stoic turn matters. Epictetus would draw a hard line between the event and the judgment. The event is simple. A message was seen, and no reply has come yet. The injury is not contained in that fact. The injury begins when you add the verdict. I am being dismissed. I did something wrong. I need to fix this now. I cannot be okay until they answer. Stoic training starts by separating those layers. What happened is one thing. What you are telling yourself about it is another. If you cannot separate them, you do not control your response. The silence does. Seneca warns, in effect, that the mind can suffer twice, once from the thing itself, and again from the imagined meaning we build around it. A delay becomes rejection. Rejection becomes humiliation. Humiliation becomes panic. Panic becomes another message. By the time your thumb reaches the keyboard, you are no longer responding to reality. You are responding to a private drama that may have little to do with the person on the other end. So the practice is not coldness, it is restraint. Put the phone down and name the fact in one sentence. They have not replied yet. Nothing more. No prophecy, no accusation, no courtroom speech. Then choose a different motion with your body. Stand up, wash a dish, finish the email, walk to another room. You are teaching yourself that unresolved information does not get to command your next action. Use caution here. Stoic restraint is not the same as pretending you do not tear, and it is not a rule against ever following up. It is a rule against letting anxiety choose the timing, wording, and emotional charge of your next move. If a reply is genuinely needed, you can send one clean follow-up later. If it is not needed, silence is often asking for patience, not pursuit. Hierocles helps sharpen that point. Care for people without turning care into possession. Someone's response time is not proof that you own a claim on their attention. Make this a daily drill. The next time your thumb starts negotiating, pause for 10 seconds before you touch the screen. Read the message once. State the fact. Drop the story. Return to the task in front of you. That small pause is where dignity begins. And over time, it becomes a deeper habit, not begging silence to explain itself, but refusing to let silence decide who you are. Rule 5. The hidden cost is not just embarrassment. It is the second payment you make when you keep demanding certainty from a place that cannot give it. The first charge is obvious. You feel awkward, exposed, maybe a little foolish, sitting there with a screen that has already seen your message and gone quiet. But the deeper cost arrives afterward, when your mind starts treating that silence like an emergency and your thumb reaches for the next text, the next check, the next rewrite. That is where the bargain turns against you. You are not just trying to communicate anymore, you are trying to buy relief. For a few minutes, the follow-up may seem to help. You have done something. The chest loosens, the room feels less heavy. Then the uncertainty returns, often stronger than before, because now you have trained yourself to believe that peace only comes after you chase it. The silence did not merely hurt you, it taught you to depend on it. This is the kind of trap Epictetus would strip down to its bones. A message seen and unanswered is an event. The event is not the injury. The judgment you add to it is where the suffering grows teeth. If you tell yourself, they are disrespecting me, or I did something wrong, or I have to fix this right now, you are no longer reacting to facts. You are reacting to a story built from fear. Stoic discipline starts there. Separate what happened from what you decided it means. Seneca warns, in different places and through different reflections, how much pain we manufacture by rehearsing imagined injury. Silence becomes larger in the mind than it is in reality. You start bargaining with shadows. You imagine conversations that never happened, motives you cannot prove, outcomes you cannot control. And every extra message is a small tax paid to anxiety. It buys a moment of motion while quietly lowering your self-respect. So the practice is simple, but not easy. Stop after the first clean message. Read the facts plainly. I sent it. It was seen. There is no reply yet. Then stop there. Do not inflate the gap into a verdict. Do not reward the uncertainty with a second panic. Return your attention to something concrete. The task in front of you, the walk you were about to take, the work you were avoiding, the meal on the stove, the person in the room who is actually present. This does not mean pretending not to care. It means caring without handing your center to another person's timing. If the relationship matters, you can still be patient without becoming dependent. If clarity is needed later, you can ask for it from a steady place instead of from a wound. That distinction matters because a desperate follow-up often sounds smaller than the need behind it. Use this rule daily. When the urge to send another text appears, pause and name the exchange out loud or in your mind. Fact, story, choice. They have not replied. Story, I am being rejected, forgotten, or made to wait on purpose. Choice, I do not have to live inside the story. That pause is the beginning of freedom. It keeps you from paying twice for the same silence. Rule 6. Give the silence one clean meaning and no more. Here's the test. Your phone lights up, you see the message was read, and then the room seems to change shape around that tiny pause. The first danger is not the silence itself. It is the speed with which your mind turns silence into a verdict. One moment, it is just a delayed reply. The next, it has become rejection, disrespect, a test, a hidden insult, a sign that you said too much, or that you matter less than you hoped. Stoic discipline cuts that chain at the first link. You are allowed to say with complete accuracy, they have not replied yet. That is a fact. Everything else is a conclusion. Epictetus built his teaching around this kind of separation. An event comes in, and then the mind rushes to stamp it with a judgment. The event is not yet the wound. The judgment is where the pain begins to multiply. If you do not inspect that judgment, you start suffering not only from what happened, but from what you imagined it must mean. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays how quickly anxiety grows when the mind feeds on uncertainty. Silence becomes larger than reality because the imagination keeps sketching extra lines around it. You replay the message, reread the tone, imagine the other person laughing, forgetting, avoiding, judging, or replacing you with something easier. None of that is confirmed, but the body reacts as if it were. Your pulse changes, your breathing tightens, your thumb hovers over the screen like it is trying to force the world to explain itself. That is the hidden cost. You begin trading peace for speculation. The more you chase certainty, the more you train yourself to treat other people's timing as a command over your mood. And once that habit settles in, a simple delay can pull your attention off your work, your sleep, your appetite, and your self-respect. You become easy to disturb because every unanswered message is now a door into a private court case. The Stoic answer is not denial, it is precision. Give the silence one clean meaning, incomplete information, nothing more. If facts later show disrespect, you can name it then. If they show care, delayed distraction, or a busy day, you can respond to that reality instead of to a fantasy. Care without possession is the deeper rule here. Hierocles describes human concern as real and natural, but not a license to cling. You can want connection without making a reply time the measure of your worth. Use that distinction in the moment. When the read receipt appears, stop and name the bare fact aloud or in your head. Read, no reply yet. Then ask, what is actually under my control right now? Usually it is the next right action. Finish the task in front of you, put the phone down, drink water, return to the conversation you were having, or wait until a reasonable time has passed before deciding whether any follow-up is needed. Be careful not to turn this into emotional numbness. Calm is not pretending you do not care. It is refusing to let an unfinished exchange become a story that owns your whole evening. If the silence continues, you can decide later whether to clarify, to step back, or to let the relationship reveal itself through time. But you do not need to become your own prosecutor before the facts arrive. Practice this daily in small moments. Every time a delay appears, separate observation from interpretation. Write down the fact first, story second, then choose one action that serves your life, not your anxiety. That is how a read receipt stops being a verdict and becomes what it always was, one incomplete moment, waiting for wisdom instead of panic. Rule 7. Do not make a stranger out of your own duty. Here's the test. The message is still unread, your eyes keep dropping to the screen, and the room starts feeling smaller because one person's silence is now occupying your attention. If you let it, that silence will pull you away from the work in front of you and make your own responsibilities feel distant, almost unfamiliar. The danger is not only distraction, it is that you begin to treat your life like it's on hold until someone else decides to answer. That is a costly habit. When you keep checking, rechecking, and waiting for the phone to change, you are quietly training yourself to let another person's timing govern your focus. The unfinished email, the dish in the sink, the report on the screen, the errand you meant to handle, all of it becomes secondary to a notification you cannot command. The mind starts serving uncertainty instead of duty, and once that pattern takes root, the silence grows larger every time it returns. Stoic teaching cuts that loop at the root. What happens on the screen is one thing, the judgment that it must control your day is another. Epictetus draws this line again and again in his teaching on impressions and assent. An event arrives, but you still choose whether to hand it authority over your mind. A delayed reply is not a sentence passed on your worth, your value, or your next action. It is incomplete information. That is all. The rest is your interpretation. Seneca warns in a similar way that fear and anxiety often build an injury in advance, long before reality has actually done anything to you. Silence can feel humiliating, but often it is our imagination that turns it into a wound. This is where Hierocles sharpens the lesson. He cared deeply about human connection, but he did not confuse care with possession. You can want a relationship, value a person, and still refuse to let their response time own your center. That distinction matters. Caring is not clinging. Concern is not dependence. If you make another person's reply the condition for your peace, you have turned a relationship into a leash. So the practice is simple and demanding. Put the phone down, turn it face down or slide it out of reach. Name the fact plainly. The message was seen, and there is no reply yet. Then stop there. Do not invent motive. Do not write a second message just to soothe the tension. Return to one clear task and complete it with full attention. If you are at work, finish the paragraph. If you are at home, wash the cup. If you are in transit, notice the street and keep walking. The point is not to become cold. The point is to recover command of your next action. Be careful with what you tell yourself in that pause. If you say, I cannot relax until they answer, you are rehearsing dependence. If you say, I do not have enough information to conclude anything, you are practicing discipline. That is a small sentence, but it protects you from building a story where facts have not yet arrived. And if the silence later proves meaningful, you will still be in a stronger position because you did not spend the waiting period abandoning your own duties. Make this a daily discipline. Each time the phone goes quiet, use it as a signal to return to what was already yours. Your work, your standards, your room, your breath, your responsibilities. The calm person is not the one who feels nothing. It is the one who refuses to let uncertainty drag them away from what must still be done. Rule 8. Care without gripping. This is the turn that keeps concern from becoming dependence. When someone leaves you unread, the pressure does not only come from the silence itself, it comes from the hand tightening around the phone, the repeated glance at the screen, the sudden urge to make their timing prove something about your place in their life. You may still care about them. You may still hope they reply. But the moment you start treating their response time like a measure of your worth, care has quietly turned into a grip. That grip is expensive. It makes you scan for signs, rewrite harmless details into threats, and wait for a notification as if it were permission to be at peace. Even if the message finally comes, the relief is short, because the deeper habit remains. Your mood now rises and falls with someone else's delay. Stoic training is meant to interrupt exactly that. The point is not indifference. The point is to keep your affection from becoming a chain around your attention. Hierocles is useful here because his way of thinking about human connection is not possessive. In the Stoic picture, people are related to us, drawn into circles of concern, and those circles can widen rather than contract. You do not have to harden yourself to respect that bond. You simply have to stop confusing care with control. A person can matter to you without becoming something you must hold in place. Their silence can be real, and your concern can be real, without the two facts turning into ownership. Marcus Aurelius pushes the same direction from another angle. In his private reflections, he keeps returning to the work in front of him, as if to say, do not let other people's behavior drag your mind away from its own duty. That matters in this moment. If you are staring at a read receipt, you are being asked to choose between two loyalties: the anxious impulse to manage another person's pace, or the steadier loyalty to your own conduct. Stoicism tells you to choose the second, not because the relationship does not matter, but because you matter enough not to abandon your own center. So what does this look like in practice? You acknowledge the fact cleanly. The message was seen, and no reply has arrived yet. Then you ask a better question: what is mine to do now? Sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes it is to continue with your day, finish the task in front of you, answer the other message waiting from someone who did respond, or simply put the phone down and let the moment be unfinished. If a follow-up is appropriate, it should come from clarity, not from panic. The caution is important. Care without gripping does not mean pretending you are untouched. It does not mean suppressing disappointment or acting like uncertainty never stings. Stoicism is not emotional denial. It is refusing to let that sting recruit imagination into building a whole drama out of a single pause. A delayed reply may reveal something. It may also reveal nothing at all. Until you have more facts, do not turn the gap into a verdict. Make this a daily discipline. Each time you feel the pull to check again, name what is happening in one plain sentence. I care, and I do not control this timing. Let that sentence break the spell. Then return to one concrete duty in the room you are actually in. Over time, that habit changes the entire shape of the experience. You stop begging silence to reassure you. You stop handing your center to a glowing screen, and you learn the Stoic strength that is quiet, not cold, to care fully, while keeping your grip light enough to let reality move on its own terms. Rule 9. The first text was enough. If you said what needed saying, and you did it clearly, then the next move is not panic. It is patience, not passive waiting, active non-chasing. Here's the test. If the message was clean, do not keep reopening the same door just because it is not opened yet. One send can be a complete act. What comes after that is no longer communication. It can easily become anxiety wearing the costume of effort. You know the pressure in the body. The phone lights up, then goes dark again. A read receipt sits there like a tiny verdict, and the room feels louder because your attention has nothing solid to land on. The wrong instinct is to touch the thread again, rewrite the line, add a joke, add context, add an apology, or send a second message that pretends to be casual while begging for relief. That move often feels responsible in the moment, but it usually trades steadiness for temporary comfort. You get a few minutes of motion and maybe a little less uncertainty, yet you also teach yourself that silence gets to steer your mood. Epictetus is the right guide here because his whole emphasis is on separating the event from the judgment. The event is simple. You sent a text and did not get an immediate answer. The judgment is the extra layer you attach to it. They're disrespecting me. I said something wrong. I am being ignored. I need to fix this now. Stoic discipline begins when you stop fusing those two things together. A delayed reply is an impression, not a verdict. It becomes injury only after you assent to the story. That is where patience becomes strength. Stoic patience is not sitting still in helplessness. It is refusing to let uncertainty command your next move. If your message was clear, then the proper follow-up may be no follow-up at all, at least not yet. Let the silence remain incomplete information instead of turning it into a full confession of your worth. Seneca warns, in effect, that the mind can suffer more from imagined injury than from the facts themselves. Many of us do that here. We are not merely waiting for a response, we are inventing a future around the absence of one. Use a simple practice in the moment. Name the fact out louder in your head. I sent one message. I do not have an answer yet. Then stop. Do not narrate motives you cannot verify. Do not decide the relationship, the friendship, or your value from one quiet window. If a reply is owed, time will reveal that more clearly than a second anxious text. If you need to follow up later, do it once calmly with enough dignity that you would not feel embarrassed reading it back. There is also a caution here. Patience is not self-erasure. You are not pretending care does not matter. You are refusing possession. Hierocles' idea of human connection helps with that balance. Care for people, but do not turn their timing into a leash around your mind. Let them be free to answer on their schedule, while you remain responsible for your own. Make this a daily habit. The next time the read receipt appears and your thumb starts bargaining, pause for 10 seconds. Put the phone down. Return to the task in front of you, even if the silence still stings. That small act is not indifference. It is the first proof that another person's timing does not own your center. Rule 10. The need to be chosen can get loud, and when it gets loud, it rarely sounds noble. It sounds like a thumb hovering over the keyboard, a half-written follow-up, a sudden urge to explain yourself again, to soften a sentence, to make your message impossible to misunderstand, or to send one more text just to prove you are still reasonable, still valuable, still worth answering. That is the pressure in the room. You are staring at the read receipt, the phone is warm in your hand, and the silence starts to feel personal. Your mind does not just see delay, it starts building a case. Maybe you were too much. Maybe you sounded awkward. Maybe if you fix the wording, the response will come. Maybe if you are a little more generous, a little funnier, a little easier to ignore, then the door opens again. But that instinct has a cost. The more you chase relief, the more you teach yourself that another person's timing controls your center. Stoicism cuts straight through that confusion. Epictetus keeps bringing the mind back to the thing most people miss. What happened is one thing, and the judgment you attach to it is another. A message being seen is a fact. The story that you have been dismissed, ranked lower, or made small is an interpretation. Those are not the same. If you treat the interpretation as truth, you will start reacting to a wound that may not even exist. Seneca warns about this in a different way when he describes how anxiety often outgrows reality in the imagination. We suffer not only from what is before us, but from what we add before we have enough information. So the practical move is not to become cold, it is to become exact. Name the event without decorating it. They saw the message and they have not replied yet. That is all you know. Then ask what the next right action is for your life, not for your nerves. If a response is needed, wait long enough to send one calm follow-up, clean and brief, without apology theater. If no response is needed, stop feeding the loop, put the phone down, return to the task in front of you, wash the dishes, finish the email, step outside. Let your body learn that a quiet screen is not an emergency. There is a deeper caution here. Caring about people is human. Gripping them is another thing entirely. A relationship, a friendship, a conversation in progress, all of it can matter without becoming a measure of your worth. Hierocles, in the fragments and later reports that survive from him, is useful here because he treats connection as something to honor without turning it into possession. You can be warm without being dependent. You can care without making your peace hostage to someone else's response time. If you want a daily practice, make it simple. The moment the read receipt lights up and your chest tightens, pause for 3 breaths. Say the facts to yourself without drama. Notice the story your mind tries to build. Then choose one grounded action before any new text. Drink water, stand up, work, walk, pray, stretch, read. Do anything that returns you to your own agency. The goal is not to win the silence. The goal is to stop surrendering your dignity to it. Next time you are left unread, you do not need to prove anything. You need to stay clear enough to act well. Rule 11. A delay is information, not humiliation. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to separate the fact of a silence from the story your mind rushes to attach to it. That is the pressure in the room. Your phone lights up, the message is seen, and then nothing. The desk feels smaller. The coffee goes cold. Your attention starts circling the same little wound, asking whether you are too much, not enough, awkward, forgettable, or somehow exposed. That is where the wrong instinct becomes expensive. You want to check again, rewrite the message, send a follow-up, or invent a reason for the quiet, so the uncertainty stops biting. Yet the hidden cost is not only embarrassment, the deeper cost is dependence. If every delay becomes a verdict, then another person's timing begins to govern your mood, your self-respect, and the pace of your own day. You start treating silence like an authority. Stoic discipline breaks that spell by separating what happened from what you concluded. A read receipt is a fact. A fact is small, plain, and incomplete. What hurts more is the judgment. They are rejecting me. I have been disrespected. I need to fix this now. I cannot be okay until they answer. Epictetus keeps pressing this line of thought in his teaching on impressions. Events arrive first, then our assent turns them into distress. The first job is not to be numb. The first job is to examine the impression before you kneel to it. Seneca points to the same trap from another angle. Much of our suffering is not created by what has fully happened, but by what the mind rehearses as if it were already confirmed. Silence can become enormous when you keep feeding it with imagined motives, imagined insults, imagined outcomes. That is why a delayed message can feel heavier than it really is. You are no longer facing one unanswered text. You are standing inside a whole theater your mind built around it. Here's the practical move. Name only the clean fact. They saw it and have not replied yet. Stop there for a moment. Do not decorate it with prophecy. Then ask a better question. What is the next right action for me, given that I do not know the full situation? Maybe the answer is to return to work. Maybe it is to set the phone down for 20 minutes. Maybe it is to send one calm follow-up later, or none at all. The Stoic turn is not passive waiting. It is refusing to let incomplete information command your next move. Hierocles is useful here, because he reminds us that care and possession are not the same thing. We can care about people, prefer their honesty, and value their attention, without making our center dependent on their response time. Relationship asks for concern, but not surrender of the self. If you care well, you do not need to clutch at every pause. Be careful, though. Patience is not a disguise for denial. Sometimes, a pattern of silence does mean distance, low effort, or a relationship that needs boundaries. Stoic calm does not ask you to romanticize neglect. It asks you not to convict before you have enough evidence. That distinction protects both dignity and judgment. Practice this daily in small ways. When a message goes unanswered, pause and say, "This is a delay, not a sentence." Put the phone face down, return to the task in front of you. Let the silence remain information, not identity. Over time, that habit trains the mind to wait without collapsing, to care without gripping, and to keep its footing while someone else chooses their pace. Rule 12. The test is your next move, not what they did, what you do after you feel the sting. By the end of this chapter, the goal is simple. You will be able to separate a real fact from the story your mind adds to silence, and then choose the next clean action instead of the next anxious one. This is where the whole episode becomes practical. The phone lights up, the message is seen, and then nothing. Your chest tightens. Your thumb starts hovering over the screen like it can negotiate reality if it just keeps tapping long enough. That is the pressure moment, half waiting, half deciding whether to send another text, rewrite the first one, or invent a reason for the quiet that will make it hurt less. The room seems louder because the phone will not answer back. The wrong instinct is to treat discomfort as a command. You want relief, so you reach for more contact, more explanation, more proof that you still matter. But chasing certainty usually costs more than it gives. It may calm you for a minute, yet it trains your mind to believe that someone else's reply time has authority over your mood. That is how uncertainty becomes dependence. One unanswered text turns into a hidden leash. Epictetus is the clearest guide here. His central point is not that silence is harmless or that people never disappoint us. It is that the event itself and the judgment we attach to it are not the same thing. A read receipt is a fact. The sentence "I am being rejected," or "I must fix this immediately," is your addition. Once you see that difference, the situation changes shape. You are no longer wrestling the message itself. You are examining the impression it produced in you. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays how easily the mind can suffer twice, once from what happened, and again from the story it builds before the facts have even settled. That is exactly what silence invites. It leaves room for imagination, and imagination tends to be dramatic when it is insecure. A delay becomes disrespect, a delay becomes betrayal. A delay becomes proof that you are less important than the last person they answered. None of that is guaranteed by the evidence in front of you. So the practical move is not to freeze and not to chase. Put the phone down. Take one breath. Name the fact cleanly. They saw the message and they have not replied yet. That is all you know. Then ask a better question. What action would I respect if I saw someone else do it right now? That question pulls you out of the spiral and back into conduct. It protects your dignity because it measures you by your choices, not by their timing. Marcus Aurelius fits here because his reflections keep returning to duty, perspective, and the work in front of you. He keeps pulling the mind back from other people's behavior toward what remains yours to govern. But you can refuse to let the absence of one occupy the whole room. You can return to the task on your desk, the conversation beside you, the walk you are about to take, the life that doesn't pause every time the screen goes quiet. Use caution here. Stoic patience is not pretending you do not care. It is not swallowing every disappointment and calling it virtue. If a pattern of silence keeps repeating, you may need clearer boundaries, less investment, or a better conversation later. But you do not need to make that decision from panic. You make it from steadiness. Practice this daily in small moments. When the urge to check again hits, pause for 10 seconds. Separate fact from story. Ask what next move you would respect. Then do that one thing without making silence your boss. That is the habit. Not numbness, not chasing. A clean response that keeps your center where it belongs. Rule 13. Do not rehearse the argument in your head as if silence has already become a fight. The moment a message is left unread, the mind often rushes ahead of reality. You start composing the reply they have not sent, the apology you may never need, the sharp line you wish you could use, the explanation that would make everything make sense. It feels productive because your thoughts are moving, but in truth you are standing in one place, burning energy on a conflict that has not happened. That is the hidden cost. Rehearsal turns uncertainty into emotional theater. You do not just wonder whether they are busy, distracted, or disinterested. You begin to act as though you have already been slighted. The chest tightens, the jaw sets, and suddenly the silence feels like evidence. A simple delay becomes a trial in your own mind. And once that happens, the next message is no longer a clean choice. It is a reaction to a story you built while waiting. Epictetus gives the core correction. What happens is one thing, and the judgment you add to it is another. The scene receipt is a fact. Your conclusion that you have been dismissed, mocked, or made small is an interpretation. Stoic discipline begins there, before emotion turns into certainty. You do not have to suppress the feeling that comes up. You have to question the sentence your mind attaches to it. If the fact is only silence, then the mind has not yet earned the right to declare war. Seneca is especially useful on this point because he keeps warning against suffering twice, once in the event and again in imagination. Silence can be ordinary, it can be messy, it can be painful, but rehearsal often makes it bigger than it is. You start meeting a person's absence with your own invented anger, and that imagined injury can exhaust you long before the real situation is even clear. So the practice is simple, but not easy. The moment you catch yourself drafting the confrontation in your head, pause and name the difference between fact and fiction. Fact, they have not replied yet. Fiction, you know exactly what that means. Then, let the next right action be something that belongs to your life, not to your spiral. Put the phone down, return to the work in front of you, finish the task, make the call, take the walk, write the paragraph, clean the counter. Let your hands do something honest while your mind settles. Be careful here because this is not a command to become cold or indifferent. Stoic restraint is not emotional amputation. If a reply matters, you can still care. You can still choose clarity later. But clarity comes after facts, not before them. Rehearsing an argument too early can make you sharp, needy, or defensive in a way that damages the very conversation you hope to have. Practice this daily. When silence triggers the urge to narrate your own hurt, stop for 3 breaths. What do I actually know? If the answer is only that the message was seen, stay with that. Do not promote a guess into a verdict. Do not hand your mood to an unfinished story. Hold the fact, drop the fiction, and keep your center long enough for reality to speak for itself. Rule 14. One calm follow-up is enough. Here's the test. Can you separate the real fact from the story your mind wants to build around the silence? A message was seen. A reply has not arrived. That is the fact. Everything else, the fear, the guesswork, the urge to rewrite your last text until it sounds impossible to reject, is interpretation. The read receipt is a small event. The storm it creates in you is the part that needs discipline. At this point, the wrong instinct feels almost reasonable. You want to check again, add one more line, make the message warmer, lighter, funnier, more apologetic, more impressive. Anything that might force movement where there is none. But that move has a hidden cost. Every extra follow-up trains your mind to believe that uncertainty must be relieved immediately, even if relief comes at the price of self-respect. You start acting as if another person's timing is a command over your nervous system. And once that pattern sets in, silence no longer stays outside you. It gets inside and starts steering. This is where the Stoic rule matters. Epictetus keeps bringing the mind back to the place where freedom actually lives, not in controlling what happens, but in examining the judgment attached to what happens. The text itself does not wound you, the meaning you assign to it does. If you decide, they saw it and I am being dismissed, you have already moved beyond evidence into assumption. If you decide, they are late, busy, distracted, or choosing not to answer yet, you still have uncertainty, but you no longer have panic, wearing the mask of certainty. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays how easily anxiety grows larger in imagination than in reality. Silence is a perfect machine for that. It offers almost nothing, and the mind rushes to fill the empty space with stories of rejection, contempt, or failure. The danger is not only embarrassment, it is the inward habit of suffering before the facts have even finished arriving. One clean follow-up protects you from that spiral because it acknowledges reality without handing your imagination the steering wheel. What does that look like in practice? You send one message that is brief, clear, and free of emotional leverage. If you need to confirm a plan, you confirm it. If you need an answer, you ask for one. Then you stop. No second message disguised as a joke. No just checking from the same place of panic. No lecture wrapped in politeness. If there is a real relationship here, your calm creates room for a real response. If there is not, flooding the chat will not create one. It will only expose how badly you wanted certainty. There is a caution here. One calm follow-up is not a license to become cold, passive, or proud. Stoic patience is not pretending you do not care. It is caring without gripping. Hierocles and the fragments and later reports that remain points toward this balance. People matter, but they are not possessions. Their response time is not your property. Their attention is not a meter of your worth. You can care about someone and still refuse to make their availability the measure of your dignity. So the daily practice is simple. When you feel the urge to send the extra text, pause and name the facts in plain language. I sent one message. It was seen. I do not yet know why there is silence. Then decide from that place, not from the ache. If a follow-up is truly needed, send one clean line and let it stand on its own. After that, return to your work, your room, your body, your next duty. That is how you keep silence from becoming a leash. Not by pretending it does not matter, but by refusing to let it make your next move for you. Rule 15. Do not turn one person into a court that judges your value. That is the trap when you are staring at a read receipt and the minutes keep stretching. One person leaves you unseen and suddenly your mind begins building a courtroom in the dark. You become the defendant, their silence becomes the evidence, and every possible explanation gets called to testify. Was your message too much? Too plain? Too needy? Too easy to ignore? The room gets quieter, but inside your head the case gets louder. Here's the danger. You are no longer responding to what happened. You are responding to the drama your mind has assembled around it. That is why this moment can steal so much more than a little calm. If you treat one reply as a verdict, you hand over your center. You let one person's timing become a measure of your worth, your attractiveness, your importance, your standing in the world. And the hidden cost is not only embarrassment, it is dependence. Each time you chase the silence, refresh the app, rewrite the message, or invent a story to explain their delay, you train yourself to believe that uncertainty must be solved immediately or it will define you. The phone becomes an instrument of self-interrogation. Stoic teaching cuts through that confusion by separating the event from the judgment. Epictetus insists, in effect, that what disturbs us is not the bare impression, but the judgment we add to it. The message was seen. That is the fact. Everything after that, disrespect, rejection, contempt, abandonment, proof of inadequacy, is an interpretation. May be true, may be false, may be incomplete. The first task is not to worship the story your fear tells, it is to inspect it. Hierocles gives a helpful social frame here. He does not ask you to stop caring about people. He asks you not to collapse your whole inner life into them. Care belongs in ordered circles, yourself first as the one responsible for judgment and action, then the people close to you, then the broader world. A person can matter without becoming your measuring stick. Their silence may deserve attention, but not authority. That distinction protects affection from turning into possession. So when someone leaves you on read, do something simpler and harder than spiraling. Name the fact in plain language. They have not replied yet. Stop there. Do not add a trial sentence. Then choose the next right action in your own life. Return to the work in front of you. Finish the errand. Go for the walk. Answer the other message. Make dinner. Read. Breathe. Sleep. A calm response is not pretending you do not care. It is refusing to let your mind appoint uncertainty as king. Be careful, though, not to use stoicism as a disguise for avoidance. Then, clarity may require a direct conversation or a boundary. The point is not to become numb. The point is to stop convicting yourself before the evidence is even complete. Practice this daily in small ways. The next time the phone lights up and then goes still, pause before you touch it again. Say to yourself, fact first, story second. Notice the difference between a delay and a sentence. Then let the room be quiet, without making your dignity wait outside it. Rule 16. Let time work before you do. Here's the test. When a message sits there unread or unanswered, can you pause long enough to separate the fact from the story your mind wants to build around it? The fact is simple. A text was seen, or it was sent into silence. Everything else is interpretation. But in the heat of the moment, your attention wants to sprint ahead of reality. It starts inventing delay, disrespect, disappointment, rejection, even the beginning of some larger shift you cannot yet prove. That is the wrong instinct, because speed often feels like control while quietly becoming dependence. The thumb reaches for the screen again. The mind reaches for a second message, a cleaner sentence, a softer tone, a sharper tone, a joke, an explanation, a rescue. You tell yourself you are being clear, but often you are only trying to soothe the discomfort of not knowing. And every time you trade composure for immediate relief, you teach yourself that uncertainty gets to command your behavior. The silence does not just unsettle you once, it trains you. Stoic discipline begins at the exact point where impression arrives and judgment follows. Epictetus is useful here because his whole method is to slow that second step down. What happened is one thing, the meaning you attach to it is another. A read receipt is not an injury by itself. The injury begins when you decide too quickly that this silence defines your value or requires an anxious response. Marcus Aurelius points back to the same term. Do not let another person's behavior drag your mind away from the work and duty in front of you. Your task is not to solve every delay in real time. Your task is to remain governed while the delay exists. There is also a quieter benefit to waiting. Time often strips away the theatrical part of the reaction. What felt enormous in the first 10 minutes can look ordinary after a walk, a shower, a meal, or a night of sleep. Seneca understood how the imagination enlarges discomfort beyond what the facts require. We suffer twice when we feed a worry before it has earned its place. First from the event, then from the story. Letting time pass does not erase reality. It reveals which part of the reaction was only heat. So what do you do in practice? You do not beg the silence to explain itself. You do not start a second conversation with your own fear. If the message was important, give it a fair window. If the answer matters, wait until your mind is steadier, and your next move is chosen, not leaked out of anxiety. Stand up, put the phone down, step into another room, return to the task already in your hands. That pause is not avoidance, it is discipline. Be careful not to mistake this for pretending not to care. Stoic waiting is not numbness, and not a performance of indifference. It is the refusal to make one unanswered message the ruler of your evening. If the relationship is real, it can survive a thoughtful pause. If it is fragile, your dignity is not improved by chasing it. Make this a daily practice. When the screen lights up and nothing comes back, name the fact once, then wait before acting. Let the first wave pass. Let time separate truth from reaction. Then decide from a calmer center what deserves your energy next. Rule 17. The silence may not be about you. Here's the pressure point. You see the message was read, the little timestamp stays bright, and the room around you seems to get louder because your phone will not answer back. In that instant, the mind rushes to fill the gap. You start replaying the wording, rereading the thread, wondering if you sounded needy, dull, too much, not enough. The body treats uncertainty like a threat, and the ego rushes in to give that threat a story with your name on it. That story is usually faster than the facts. It can sound like truth because it has emotional force, but emotional force is not evidence. A delay may mean the other person is tired, at work, commuting, handling family stress, avoiding a difficult conversation, or simply being careless with their phone. None of those possibilities automatically make the silence good. They just make it incomplete. Stoic discipline begins right there, separating the event from the judgment. Epictetus keeps that distinction at the center of his teaching. What happened is that the message was seen and no reply has come yet. What you add is the accusation, the guess, the interpretation, the whole hidden trial in your head. That distinction matters because the first injury often comes from imagination, not from the delay itself. Seneca warns, in effect, that we suffer twice, when we let fear complete the picture before reality has spoken. Silence becomes enormous when you feed it with narrative. One unread minute becomes rejection. One late reply becomes disrespect. One quiet afternoon becomes proof that you are foolish to care. The cost is not just embarrassment, it is dependence. You train yourself to treat someone else's timing as a command over your mood. The Stoic answer is not to pretend you do not care. It is to care without collapsing. Hierocles' way of thinking about human connection helps here. Relationship is real, concern is real, but concern does not have to become possession. You can value a person without demanding that every pause be explained on your schedule. You can hope for warmth without making your peace hostage to their responsiveness. That is a much firmer kind of care, because it does not need constant reassurance to stay intact. So when the silence lands, do one clean thing first. Name the fact without dressing it in a verdict. They have not replied yet. That is enough for the moment. Then ask what is actually available to you. If there is no action required, return to your duty. If one calm follow-up is appropriate later, send it once and leave it alone. If the pattern continues, evaluate it with clear eyes when the time comes. But do not turn incomplete information into a conclusion just because the waiting feels uncomfortable. The caution is simple. Not every silence is innocent, and not every delay deserves endless grace. Stoicism is not denial. It is refusing to accuse without evidence and refusing to beg for certainty from a moment that cannot give it. Keep your standards. Keep your dignity. Do not let a read receipt decide your worth. A useful daily practice is to pause whenever the urge to check returns. Breathe once, state the fact, drop the story, and redirect your attention to the next rightful task in front of you. Over time, that small discipline teaches your nervous system that a silence is not an order. It is only a silence, and you are still allowed to choose your next move. Rule 18. Watch the moment your dignity starts bargaining. That is the exact second the whole scene changes. Your phone is still there, face up on the table, and the silence has already done its work. You were fine a moment ago, or at least manageable, and now you feel the pull to become easier, sweeter, smaller, funnier, more available, more impressive, anything that might coax a reply out of someone who has already chosen not to answer yet. The danger is not only embarrassment, it is the quiet trade you begin to make with yourself. You start offering a little more than you meant to. You check again, you rewrite the message. You consider sending a follow-up that sounds casual, but really asks for reassurance. You begin to act as if their timing has authority over your posture, your tone, even your sense of worth. That is how uncertainty becomes dependence, not all at once, in small concessions. Stoicism cuts through that moment by refusing to confuse desire with necessity. Epictetus keeps pressing this distinction. What happens is one thing, the judgment you attach to it is another. A read receipt is a fact. It is not a verdict on your value, your desirability, or your right to be treated with care. The mind wants to leap from "they saw it" to "I must fix this," or "I must be failing somehow." That leap is where dignity starts bargaining. The event is not the injury. The story is. Seneca is useful here because he keeps warning how much suffering comes from the imagination before reality has done its work. A silence can become larger in the mind than it is in the world. You can sit in a cafe, at a desk, in bed, and feel as if you are being slowly erased, when in truth you only have incomplete information. Maybe they are rude. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they saw it and forgot. Maybe they are avoiding a conversation. You do not know yet. The Stoic answer is not to pretend the uncertainty feels good. It is to stop letting your mind turn uncertainty into humiliation. So what do you do in practice? The moment you notice yourself bargaining, name it plainly. I want a reply, and I am starting to spend my dignity to get it. Then stop, put the phone down, let your shoulders drop. Do not send the extra text just to calm the pulse in your chest. Do not make a performance out of your own nervous system. Return to the next right action in front of you. The email, the walk, the dish, the conversation, the work that still belongs to you whether they answer or not. There is also a caution here. Stoic calm is not a trick for suppressing care. You are not trying to become cold, detached, or impossible to hurt. You are refusing to confuse care with surrender. You can want connection and still keep your center. You can hope for a response without making yourself hostage to response time. That is the line. Make this a daily practice. Every time silence starts to pressure you, pause and ask one hard question. Am I responding or am I bargaining? If you catch the bargain early, you keep your dignity intact. And once you stop paying for attention with self-abandonment, the phone becomes just a phone again. A message, not a judge. Rule 19. Do not reward mixed signals with panic. Here's the test. When someone is warm one day and cold the next, can you separate the fact from the story your mind starts building around it? A read receipt, a delayed reply, a sudden shift in tone, a message that felt open and then went silent, none of that is automatically a verdict. It is information, but not a complete one. The danger is that uncertainty feels unbearable, so you rush to fill the gap with fear, and fear starts speaking as if it were knowledge. That is where the wrong instinct gets expensive. You want to chase the warm day, rescue the connection, send a follow-up, soften your words, explain what you meant, or prove you're still easy to like. But panic teaches the other part of you to wait for permission from whatever mood arrives next. You begin organizing your behavior around someone else's inconsistency. The hidden cost is not only embarrassment, it is dependence. Each anxious response trains you to believe that a flicker of attention must be protected at all costs, even if it costs your dignity. Epictetus gives the core correction here. He keeps drawing the line between what happens and the judgment we attach to it. The message was seen, that is the event. They do not care, I said the wrong thing, I need to fix this now, or I am being rejected, are judgments layered on top. Stoic discipline begins by refusing to confuse the impression with the truth. A mixed signal may mean distraction, hesitation, divided attention, or a changing relationship. It does not instantly mean your worth has been decided. Seneca's warning fits this scene too. He often returns to the way anxiety inflates the present, making us suffer twice, once in reality and again in imagination. Silence can become bigger than it is. One cold reply can spread through the mind like smoke, filling every corner with interpretation. That is why panic feels urgent and persuasive. It wants certainty at any price. But certainty purchased through nervous chasing is fragile. It calms you for a moment and then leaves you more sensitive to the next shift. Hierocles helps refine the response. His idea of care is not possession. You can value people, stay open, and still refuse to hand them the steering wheel of your inner life. Caring wisely means noticing a pattern without turning it into obsession. If someone is inconsistent, you do not need to become cruel or theatrical. You simply allow the evidence to speak over time. If the connection is real, it can survive clarity. If it cannot survive clarity, panic was never going to save it. So the practice is simple, but not easy. When the signal changes, pause before you react. Name only the clean fact. They were warm, then they were not. Drop the rest of the script until you have more evidence. Do not send the message that is really a plea for relief. Do not rewrite the last text as if extra words could buy control. Return to the next useful action in front of you. Work, exercise, dinner, the conversation in the room, the duty already waiting. The caution is this: calm is not pretending not to care. It is caring without collapsing. It is possible to be disappointed and still be steady. It is possible to let mixed signals remain mixed while you keep your footing. Make that your daily practice. When uncertainty shows up, separate fact from fantasy, and do not reward confusion with panic. Rule 20. The real problem is attention drift, not the read receipt itself, not even the silence. What actually starts to injure you is the way your mind keeps drifting back to the phone, back to the unopened possibility, back to the question you cannot force into an answer. You are in the middle of a gym set, a meeting, a dinner with family, a walk through the city. And then that quiet notification in the back of your mind starts pulling harder than the work in front of you. The body stays where it is, but the attention has already left the room. That is why this chapter matters beyond texting. A delayed reply can become a hook. The hook is not just emotional, it is organizational. It steals the next 10 minutes, then the next hour, and suddenly your evening is arranged around someone else's timing. The wrong instinct is to check again, rewrite the message, unlock the phone for the 10th time, or imagine that a new angle will produce certainty. But each glance trains the same lesson. Your peace depends on the next signal. That is a costly lesson to rehearse. Stoic practice starts earlier than the reaction. Epictetus keeps drawing the line between the event and the judgment. A message seen and not answered is one event. The thought that it means rejection, disrespect, or loss of worth is another. If you do not separate those two, you hand over your attention to the loudest interpretation in the room. Seneca warns in his surviving letters and essays how often people suffer more in the mind than in the thing itself. Silence grows huge when you feed it with imagined meaning. Marcus Aurelius gives the counterweight here: return to the work that is actually yours. His private reflections keep coming back to this movement, away from fascination with other people's behavior and back toward duty, character, and the present task. That is not coldness, it is mental order. If you are lifting, finish the set. If you are working, finish the sentence. If you are eating, taste the meal instead of staring at the screen as though staring could extract an answer. Attention is not a vague mood, it is a resource, and you are allowed to protect it. There is also a social caution here. Caring about people does not require becoming available to every fluctuation in their response time. Hierocles, as later Stoic fragments and reports suggest, treats our concern for others as real, but not possessive. You can care without gripping. You can notice without spiraling. You can leave room for ordinary delay, distraction, and uneven timing, without turning every pause into a verdict on the relationship. That balance matters because the alternative is dependence dressed up as concern. So build a simple rule for your day. If the message is not genuinely urgent, it waits for the next check window. Not because you are pretending not to care, because your mind deserves a schedule. When the thought returns, name it plainly. This is uncertainty, not proof. This is a gap, not a conclusion. Then place your attention back where you can actually act. Practice that once, then again, until it becomes familiar. Notice how often the urge to check arrives right at the edge of discomfort. That is the training moment. Pause, breathe, keep your hands on the task in front of you. A silence may still be there when you return later, but it will no longer own the entire evening. Rule 21. Quiet people still need boundaries. Here is the pressure point. You are staring at the same glowing screen in the dim room, and the silence is starting to feel like a command. You tell yourself you're being patient, but underneath that word is a softer bargain. Maybe if you stay available enough, careful enough, easy enough, the message will finally come back and make the discomfort stop. That is where the trouble begins. Patience can turn into self-erasure when you use it to excuse a pattern that keeps pulling your attention off center. The wrong instinct is to confuse kindness with limitless access. You let the unanswered message sit, but only for a moment, and then you start rearranging yourself around it. You check again. You reread the thread. You invent reasons for the delay that somehow make you smaller. If you're not careful, a silence becomes a place where your mind lives, and every minute you spend there quietly teaches you that another person's timing has authority over your mood. That is not calm, that is dependence wearing a polite expression. Stoicism draws a sharper line. Epictetus keeps returning to this kind of moment. What happens outside you is not yet the injury. The judgment you add is where you hand away your freedom. A read receipt is an event. It is not a sentence about your value, your importance, or your place in someone's life. The fact is simple. They saw it and have not replied. Everything beyond that is interpretation. Stoic discipline begins by refusing to let an incomplete fact become a total story. Hierocles is useful here, because his way of thinking about relationships does not demand coldness, only proportion. Care is real, but care is not possession. You can value someone without making their response time the measure of your peace. You can leave room for delay, distraction, or ordinary human imperfection, while still protecting your own dignity. That is the border, not a wall that cuts people off, but a line that keeps your own mind from collapsing into pursuit. Practically, that means you do not keep pressing the doorbell of a conversation that has gone quiet, just to relieve your anxiety for 5 minutes. You name the fact, and you stop adding the extra sentence your fear wants to write. You can decide on one clean follow-up later if it is appropriate. You can also decide that nothing more is needed right now. The key is that the next move comes from judgment, not from agitation. Be careful not to turn this into suppression. The Stoic answer is not pretending you never cared. It is acknowledging that you care, while refusing to make care into a leash. Seneca warns in his surviving letters about how the mind can suffer more in anticipation than in reality, and unanswered silence is one of the easiest places for that to happen. The injury grows when you feed it with rehearsals, accusations, and imagined conclusions. A daily practice helps. When the screen goes quiet, pause and say to yourself, fact, story, choice. Fact, there is no reply yet. Story, whatever my mind is trying to prove. Choice, I return to what is in front of me. That small sequence protects your center. Over time, you stop treating every pause as a verdict and start treating it as information. That is how a border holds. Calm, firm, and human. Rule 22. If you need a reply to feel okay, pause. Here's the test. When the message has been seen and your body starts acting like the silence is an emergency, separate the fact from the story. The fact is simple. The message was delivered, it was read, and nothing else has arrived yet. The story is everything your mind begins adding on top of that empty space. They are losing interest, they are judging you, you said too much, you should fix this now. The first thing to notice is not their silence, but how quickly your mind tries to turn uncertainty into a verdict. That pressure is physical. Your chest tightens, your thumb hovers over the screen, you feel the urge to send a second text, rewrite the first one, add an explanation, or check the app again, as if looking harder might make a different reality appear. And for a moment, that instinct can feel reasonable because it promises relief. But the hidden cost is that every time you chase comfort through another check, another follow-up, another edit, you teach yourself that peace only comes from someone else's timing. That is how a brief delay becomes dependence. Stoic teaching cuts through that chain at the point where it matters most. The impression is not the injury. Epictetus keeps pressing this distinction in his discourses in Enchiridion as recorded by Arrian. Something happens, yes, but the wound is often made by the judgment you attach to it. A read receipt is an event. It is not by itself a humiliation. It does not contain a complete explanation of your worth, your place in someone's life, or the future of the relationship. The injury arrives when you assent to the worst story too quickly. Seneca warns in another direction, but toward the same center. We suffer more in imagination than the moment requires. Silence grows enormous when the mind feeds it. It becomes a courtroom, a rejection, a forecast, a final answer. Yet most of the time, all you actually possess is incomplete information. That matters. Incomplete information is uncomfortable, but it is not a command. So what do you do in the practical moment? Stop. Do not draft the second message while your pulse is loud. Do not measure your value by the speed of their response. Put the phone face down for 1 minute, 1 full minute, and let your breathing become the first thing you obey instead of the app. Name the fact in plain language. They have not replied yet. Then name the judgment as a judgment. I am telling myself a story about what this means. That small separation is the beginning of freedom. There is also a caution here. Stoic pause is not pretending not to care, and it is not cold withdrawal. Care is human. Wanting clarity is human. But if you let your need for reassurance become a habit of immediate reaching, you will slowly trade dignity for relief. The point is to stop giving your inner state away to every delay. Make this a daily practice, not just a rescue tactic. Each time you are left unread, use the same sequence. Fact, breath, judgment, choice. Fact, the reply has not come. Breath, one slow cycle before touching the screen again. Judgment, this is only one possibility, not the whole truth. Choice, return to what is in front of you. Work, walk, wash the cup, finish the call. Keep your word to yourself. The phone can stay quiet. Rule 23. The better question is not why did they do this, but what did I assume the moment they did it? By the time a read receipt sits there in the dark, your mind has usually already sprinted ahead of the facts. You see the seen message, and suddenly the silence feels like rejection, disrespect, or replacement. The room gets louder. Your thumb hovers. You start rewriting the sentence in your head, as if one more perfect version of the text could force reality to explain itself. Here's the test. Can you separate the event from the story before the story starts steering your behavior? That is where most people lose their footing. The event is simple. The message was seen, and no reply has come yet. The hidden cost arrives when you treat your first assumption as if it were a confirmed verdict. Then every refresh, every second glance, every imagined explanation becomes a little payment toward anxiety. You are no longer responding to silence. You are negotiating with the meaning you assign to it. And once that begins, the mind can make a small delay, feel like an insult, even when the truth is far less dramatic. Seneca warns in Substance that we suffer more often in anticipation than in reality. Silence can hurt, but imagined injury can hurt longer. Epictetus gives the cleanest rule for this moment. An impression is not yet the truth, it is only an appearance until you give it your assent. That matters because the first thought that flashes up after being left unread is rarely wise, it is usually fast. Fast thoughts want certainty right now. Stoic discipline asks for a pause before agreement. Not denial, not numbness, just a refusal to confuse your reaction with the facts themselves. You do not have to believe every story your nervous system invents. So name the assumption, plainly, not in a dramatic paragraph, not in a speech to the ceiling. Write one line: I assumed they were ignoring me, or I assumed I did something wrong, or I assumed I am being pushed aside. The point is not to flatter yourself with doubt for its own sake. The point is to see the shape of the thought clearly enough that you can examine it instead of obeying it. Once it is on paper, it is easier to ask what is actually known. Seen message, no reply yet. That is the fact. Everything beyond that needs evidence, time, or a direct conversation. Hierocles helps here too, because caring about people does not require turning their response time into a measure of your worth. You can want connection without treating every delay as a personal emergency. You can care without clinging. That is a very different posture from chasing reassurance until your dignity starts to thin. Use this in real time. When the silence lands, stop and ask, what did I assume in the first 5 seconds? Then compare that assumption to the actual evidence. If you do not have enough evidence, do not promote the assumption to truth. Return to the next right action. Finish the task. Keep the appointment. Close the app. Take a walk. Answer the message that does have to be answered, or leave the conversation alone until there is something real to address. One caution matters here. Checking your assumption is not a trick for forcing yourself to feel nothing. It is not an excuse to accept disrespect forever, and it is not a way to pretend every silence is harmless. Sometimes a delayed reply does reveal distance, disinterest, or the need for a boundary, but you will judge that better if you begin from facts rather than panic. The calm mind sees more. Make this a daily practice. When a message goes unanswered, write the assumption before you write the follow-up. If the assumption is only a fear, let it pass. If it is supported, then you can choose your next move with dignity intact. That is the Stoic turn. Fact first, story second, action last. Rule 24. Calm is not apathetic. If you are staring at the screen and trying to decide whether to send another message, this is the point where your mind can mistake restraint for indifference. It is not. The room feels louder because the reply never came, and that quiet starts pressing on your chest like a verdict. You want to fix the feeling fast. Check again, rewrite the text, add an emoji, explain yourself, or prove that you are still easygoing, still kind, still worthy of a response. But that urge is not calm. It is anxiety trying to disguise itself as action. The hidden cost is subtle. When you panic in front of silence, you do not just feel temporary discomfort. You train yourself to treat another person's timing as the controller of your mood. You begin to hand over your center one notification at a time. And if you keep doing that, you can become less honest, less steady, and less clear. You may start saying things you do not mean, asking for reassurance you did not need 5 minutes earlier, or shrinking your own dignity just to relieve uncertainty for a moment. That is not care. That is dependence. Stoic calm works differently. Epictetus taught that what happened and what you judge about what happened are not the same thing. A seen message is a fact. They are ignoring me, I did something wrong, or I need to repair this right now, are additions your mind makes on top of the fact. The first discipline is to separate the event from the story. The event is simple. The message was read, and there is no reply yet. Anything beyond that remains unconfirmed. Stoic training begins there, before the spiral has time to harden into certainty. Marcus Aurelius points in the same direction, when he keeps returning to duty, perspective, and the work in front of him. He does not ask the mind to become numb. He asks it to stay governed. You can be warm and composed at the same time. You can care about the person and still refuse to let their response speed decide your self-respect. That is the balance this chapter is after, not indifference, but inner order. In practice, this means pausing before any follow-up and asking one clean question: what do I actually know? If the answer is only that the message was seen and no reply has arrived, then stay with that fact. Do not punish, do not chase, and do not build a courtroom in your head. If a reply later comes and a real conversation is needed, you will still be able to speak plainly because you did not waste your energy performing for silence. There is also a caution here. Calm is not the same as pretending nothing matters. If someone's patterns are consistently dismissive, you may eventually need a boundary, not a fantasy. Stoic composure does not ask you to tolerate confusion forever. It asks you not to confuse the first moment of uncertainty with the final truth. When the phone goes quiet, breathe once, label the fact, drop the extra story, and return to the next right task. Answer the email, finish the walk, wash the cup, read the page. That is not coldness. That is freedom from panic, and it is how you stay human without becoming hostage to somebody else's timing. Rule 25. If they matter, you can be patient. Not forever, not blindly, but patiently enough to let reality appear before you decide what the silence means. If someone is important to you, the test is not whether you can tolerate a minute of discomfort. The test is whether you can remain steady without turning uncertainty into a crisis. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to separate the fact of a delayed reply from the story your mind wants to build around it. When the read receipt sits there and nothing comes back, the pressure can feel strangely physical. Your thumb hovers, your chest tightens. You start asking questions the screen cannot answer. Did I say too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Are they pulling away? Should I send something lighter, shorter, funnier, more useful, more apologetic? That is where patience begins to break apart, because the mind stops waiting and starts bargaining. It wants relief more than truth. That bargaining has a hidden cost. The more quickly you reach for another text, another explanation, another check, the more you teach yourself that peace depends on their timing. You begin to treat a delayed response as an emergency. But a delay is only an event. The injury comes from the interpretation you fasten to it. Epictetus presses this point throughout his teaching. What happens outside you is one thing, the judgment you attach to it is another. Silence is incomplete information. It is not yet a final verdict on your value, your place in someone's life, or the whole future of the relationship. Stoic patience is not passive waiting with clenched teeth. It is disciplined waiting with your center still intact. That is why the old Stoic writers treat imagination with suspicion when it runs ahead of evidence. Seneca warns, in effect, that we often suffer more in anticipation than in reality. A quiet phone can become a courtroom in the mind, and every minute of silence can feel like testimony against you. But most of that pain is self-authored. The facts are smaller than the story. So the practical move is simple, though not easy. Name the fact plainly. They have seen the message, and they have not replied yet. Stop there. Do not add motives you cannot prove. Do not draft a defense against a charge that has not been made. Then decide what your next right action is apart from the phone. Return to your work. Wash the dish. Finish the walk. Answer the email. Keep your body moving through the day instead of freezing beside a glowing screen. That is not avoidance. That is self-command. There's also a caution here. Patience is not the same as making yourself small or pretending that every silence is harmless. If a pattern becomes consistent, if respect is repeatedly absent, if your patience is only feeding a situation that is clearly unhealthy, it means clear seeing. You can care about people without giving them ownership of your mood. You can stay open without becoming available to confusion forever. Hierocles' view of human relationship helps here. Concern should be human, not possessive. Care is not the same as dependency. Make this a daily practice. When the urge hits, pause and separate the event from the story. Say to yourself, there is the silence, and there is my conclusion about the silence. Those are not the same thing. Then choose the calmer action. That choice is patience with an edge. It protects dignity without turning cold, and it keeps your attention where it belongs, on what you can do now, not on what someone else has decided to do later. Rule 26. The next check does not need to be you. By now you have already seen the message, felt the delay, and noticed the itch to look again as if the screen might finally change your mood. Here's the test. Can you separate the fact from the story? The fact is simple. A reply has not arrived yet. Everything after that is interpretation. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they saw it and forgot. Maybe they are avoiding it. But if you keep refreshing the thread, you are not gathering truth. You are feeding the part of the mind that cannot tolerate uncertainty. That is the hidden cost. The second check feels harmless because it is small, but it teaches dependence. It says your attention must return to the same door until somebody opens it for you. The body stays still, but the mind starts kneeling. And once that pattern sets in, silence becomes louder than it is, because each glance at the phone trains your nervous system to treat waiting as an emergency. Seneca warns in his letters that we suffer more in imagination than reality often requires. A read receipt can become a whole drama if you keep supplying it with extra scenes. The Stoic move is not to pretend you do not care. It is to refuse to add a judgment that the event does not deserve. Epictetus gives the core rule here. What happens is one thing, and what you decide it means is another. A delayed reply is an event, not a verdict. Your worth is not being measured by the timing of someone else's thumb. Your task is to notice the impression. I have been ignored, and hold it up before assenting to it. Maybe that judgment is true. Maybe it is not. You do not have enough evidence yet, and Stoic patience begins right there. So give the next moment a different shape. Put the phone face down. Stand up. Wash a cup. Let cold water run over your hands. Turn your body towards something concrete. The email you have been avoiding, the page you are reading, the dishes in the sink, the shoes by the door. The point is not to force yourself into numbness. It is to show through movement that your day does not belong to the refresh button. Even a small physical act interrupts the loop and returns your mind to something you can actually govern. Be careful, though, not to turn this into a performance of indifference. The goal is not to punish them, stalk your own feelings, or build a proud little wall around your heart. It is simply to stop making one unanswered message the commander of your nervous system. If the silence later proves important, you will be in a better position to respond clearly. If it proves meaningless, you will have saved yourself an hour of unnecessary suffering. Make this the daily practice. When the urge to check returns, name the fact once, breathe, and do one physical task before touching the phone again. One check is information, and fifth are often just anxiety wearing a watch. Teach your mind a different reflex. The next check does not need to be you. Rule 27. Let silence reveal, not rule. When a message is seen and nothing comes back, your mind rushes to fill the gap. You start building a courtroom out of one quiet moment. Maybe they are upset. Maybe you said too much. Maybe you are being sidelined. The phone in your hand becomes louder than the room around you, and the absence of a reply begins to feel like a sentence. Here's the test. Can you hold the fact without surrendering to the story? A read receipt is real. Your panic narrative is optional. That is where the wrong instinct usually takes over. You want to check again, rewrite the message, send a follow-up, or invent a neat explanation so you can stop hurting. The hidden cost is subtle. Every time you do that, you teach yourself that uncertainty has authority over your peace. You are no longer waiting for information. You are asking another person's timing to govern your self-respect. Seneca warned, in his own way, that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. Silence can become enormous when the mind starts decorating it with fear. The Stoic turn is to separate impression from judgment. Epictetus teaches this distinction again and again in his discourses and Enchiridion as preserved by Arrian. What happened is one thing, what you claim it means is another. The message was seen, that is the event. They don't care about me, I ruined it, or I need to fix this right now, are judgments layered on top of the event. And once you can see that layering, the pressure changes. You are no longer fighting the fact itself, you are examining the meaning you attach to it. Hierocles helps sharpen this further. In the fragments and later reports that survive, he is remembered for thinking carefully about our circles of concern. We are made for relationship, but not for possession. Care is natural, gripping is not. You can value someone, want clarity, and still refuse to turn their response time into a measure of your worth. That is the balance this scene asks for. Let the silence inform you, but do not let it absorb you. In practice, that means giving the silence one clean meaning at first. Incomplete information, not rejection, not proof, not a command. Then act from that clarity. Put the phone down, return to the task in front of you. If a follow-up is appropriate later, send one calm message and leave it there. If it is not, let the quiet do its work without making you chase it. The point is not to become cold, it is to stay governable. Be careful here, because silence can reveal real things over time. It can show distance, immaturity, disinterest, busyness, or simply a different rhythm than yours. Stoicism does not ask you to pretend every delay is fine. It asks you not to draft a verdict before the evidence is complete. A patient response can preserve dignity. A desperate one often manufactures embarrassment where none was required. Make this a daily practice. When the read receipt lands and the room goes still, name the fact out loud if you need to. They have seen it. I do not yet know why they have not replied. Then notice the first story your mind adds and drop it. Return to your duty, your work, your breath, your walk, your evening. Let silence reveal what it will. Do not let it rule the next hour. Rule 28. The small win is not sending the extra text. That is the moment where the whole episode can turn. Not because one more message is morally disastrous, but because the urge behind it is trying to take command. Your phone is glowing in the dark room. The read receipt is still there. The silence still has weight. And in that pressure, the mind starts bargaining. Maybe if you send one more line, soften it, clarify it, add a little humor, you will finally feel settled. But that relief is usually brief, and the cost is larger than it looks. The hidden danger is not only embarrassment, it is the training of dependence. Every time you rush to fill the gap, you teach yourself that uncertainty must be soothed immediately, that your nervous system gets to vote before your judgment does. The extra text can become a tiny surrender. It says, in effect, that their timing now controls your calm. Stoicism does not ask you to stop caring. It asks you to stop handing the steering wheel to agitation. Epictetus is useful here because his whole method begins by separating what happened from the judgment you attach to it. The event is simple. They saw the message and have not replied. The judgment is the leap into panic, insult, neediness, or self-blame. That leap is where your freedom is lost. Marcus Aurelius gives the same turn in a different register. He keeps bringing the mind back from the disturbance of other people to the work still in front of him, not because people do not matter, but because you cannot build a stable life if every silence knocks you off your task. The unanswered text is not a command, it is incomplete information. A person may be busy, distracted, unsure, overwhelmed, or simply careless. You do not need to solve all of that in the next 30 seconds. Here's the practice. Name the fact once, without decoration. They have not replied yet. Then stop. Notice the urge to send the follow-up, but do not confuse urge with instruction. Put the phone down, touch the desk, breathe once or twice. Return to the next concrete action in your day, even if your attention is still noisy. That may be work, a meal, a walk, or a conversation already in front of you. The point is not to pretend you do not care. The point is to keep care from becoming compulsion. There is also a caution here. If you use stoicism to justify coldness, you miss the point entirely. The aim is not to become numb, unavailable, or proud. It is to respond cleanly. One calm follow-up later, if it is actually useful, is different from a nervous cascade of messages sent just to reduce tension. A healthy boundary protects dignity. It does not erase humanity. Make this a daily drill. Every time a notification leaves you unsettled, pause before reacting. Ask, what is the fact, and what is the story? If the story is running ahead of the evidence, let it pass. The small win is the silent one. You felt the pull, and you did not obey it. That is how a free mind is trained, one unread moment at a time. Rule 29, keep your center, then decide. When the silence keeps stretching out, your mind will try to rush you into a move before you are ready. That is the danger in these moments. Not just the unanswered message, but the feeling that you must do something right now so the discomfort stops. You start imagining exits, rehearsing explanations, checking the phone again, or deciding the whole relationship in the heat of one quiet hour. But a decision made from that pressure is rarely a clean decision. It is usually a reaction dressed up as clarity. Here is the point where Stoic discipline matters most. Epictetus keeps returning to the same core distinction. What happened is one thing, and the judgment you attach to it is another. The read receipt is a fact. The ache in your chest is a fact. The conclusion that you have been dismissed, devalued, or forgotten is not yet a fact, unless the evidence truly supports it. If you collapse those into one thing, you hand your reasoning over to the loudest feeling in the room. If you separate them, you recover a little space. And that space is everything. Seneca warns in different places about the way anxiety expands what is uncertain into something much larger than it is. Silence is fertile ground for imagined injury. A delayed reply becomes a story about rejection. A neutral pause becomes a verdict on your worth. The mind can suffer twice, once from what is real, and again from what it invents. That is why the first task is not to solve the whole relationship. It is to stop feeding the illusion that you must finish the story immediately. So what does keeping your center actually look like? It means you name the event without adding insult to it. They have not replied yet. That is the whole sentence. Then you check your body, your breath, your posture, and the impulse to reach for your phone again. You do not obey the first wave of panic. You let the feeling cast through without making it your commander. If a larger response is needed later, you can choose it from a steadier place. One clear follow-up, a calm boundary, a conversation in person, or the decision to step back if the pattern stays the same. Hierocles is useful here because he reminds us that caring about others does not require possession. You can value someone's presence without surrendering your equilibrium to their timing. That distinction protects both dignity and relationship. It keeps concern human instead of needy, and it keeps patience from turning into self-abandonment. The caution is simple. Do not call every pause a sign, and do not call every ache intuition. Some silences are ordinary, some are careless, some reveal more than words would, but you cannot tell which one it is while you are still spinning. First restore your center, then decide what the situation deserves. When the phone goes quiet, stop for 10 seconds. Name the fact. Drop the story. Return to the task in front of you. That small discipline trains your mind to wait without collapsing, and to choose without begging silence to explain itself. Rule 30. The final rule is simple. Here's the test. When the screen lights up and then goes still, when you see that message was read and the room somehow feels smaller, the job is not to decode a hidden verdict from silence. The job is to separate what happened from what your mind rushed in to add. The fact is plain, a message was seen, and no reply has come yet. Everything beyond that is interpretation. That distinction matters more than it sounds. The wrong instinct is to let the gap become a mirror. You check again, you reread your last sentence, you rewrite the same message in your head, and decide it sounded needy, dull, too eager, too cold, too much. Then you start treating the delay as if it were a sentence about your value. That is where the real injury begins, not in the read receipt itself, but in the private trial you hold after it. Seneca warned, in his surviving letters and essays, about the mind's talent for enlarging pain before reality has even finished speaking. We do that here. We suffer the silence twice, once in the moment, and again in imagination. Epictetus gives the clearest correction. The event is not your judgment of the event. A delayed reply is not the same thing as rejection, contempt, or proof that you misread the relationship. It may be carelessness, it may be busyness, it may be hesitation, it may be nothing dramatic at all. Stoic discipline begins by refusing to stamp a story onto incomplete information. You do not need to deny that the silence feels uncomfortable. You only need to stop promoting discomfort into certainty. Once you see that, the next step becomes practical. Do not send the anxious follow-up just to buy a few minutes of relief. Do not chase the person in order to quiet the feeling. Relief purchased that way is expensive. It trains you to believe that another person's response time rules your nervous system. Instead, name the fact in plain language. No reply yet. Then return to the next right action already waiting for you. Finish the task on your desk. Walk the block. Wash the dish. Answer the email that matters. Text someone who does not leave you suspended in speculation. Stoic patience is not passivity. It is self-command under uncertainty. There is also a humane boundary in this. Hierocles reminds us that care is real, but it should not become possession. You can want closeness, clarity, and warmth without making someone else's timing into a leash around your attention. You can care about people without handing over the center of your life to their notification habits. That is a subtle but important difference. The first keeps your humanity intact. The second turns care into dependence. And a caution, if the silence is part of a larger pattern, you still do not need to panic or perform. You need clarity. Stoic calm is not a way of pretending every gap is fine. It is a way of refusing to collapse into drama before you have enough facts to respond well. If a pattern keeps repeating, you can address it directly later, from steadiness rather than need. Make this a daily practice. When the read receipt stings, pause once, label the fact, drop the story, and choose one clean action before you touch the phone again. That is how you protect dignity, keep perspective, and stop handing your piece to a blinking screen. The final rule is simple. Fact